Hi. Brad and I are actually both in the landscape architecture program as well, and so what you're going to see next are some of the things that we love to do, which is to take community input as well as some of the science, especially what we learned during what Tina and David had mentioned, and really synthesize that into a vision or a plan that the community can use to move forward. So our main focus in the summer was Lake Marion, and so we'll start there. Something that we mentioned, or David had mentioned before, is increasing the lake depth, and that's removing or dredging sediments, those unconsolidated sediments from the bottom, down to and not compromising the clay layer, and actually creatively moving those dredged spoils out to the edges to create the shoreland habitat. Maybe I'm a little too far now. We have to point this at. Okay, to create this kind of wetland or littoral zone that we're talking about, wetland plants, this can be a really wonderful place for native vegetation and attracts a lot of macroinvertebrates that Tina was showing us, and fish. And creating lots of nodes for these fishing zones. It's a very popular fishing lake. And so we wanted to create some more attractive areas. Maybe at these locations you can also put in those structure and things for the fish to hide out. More special places for fishing nodes. And as we know, there's a lot of lawn spaces already existing along KP. We want to keep those, maintain those, but frame them with the natural vegetation to create the shoreline buffer that's really going to manage our nutrients from getting into the lake. There was also mention of a new pavilion that was discussed, locating it here in this corner, and providing more trails, obviously, and parking. Where do we have the pointer set? Go. All right, so there's already some existing parking spaces here and here, but they're not very well developed. And there's also not any parking here at this existing shelter, so we wanted to create more ample and accessible parking spaces. So moving on to, I think, what's a really interesting challenge for this project is the small and large pond area. So the dam is located right here, and water from Black Earth Creek is diverted into this small pond, which is highly eutrophic, hyper-eutrophic actually. It's pretty shallow, and then water enters into this large pond, which is also very consistently shallow and eutrophic, and then it finally enters Lake Marion. So this area, when the dam is removed, and the village has decided to remove the dam this November, these lakes will go away, or these ponds will go away, they'll drain out. So there needs to be some ideas about what to do with this space when that happens. And from the planning exercises, the community actually came up with some really cool and different ideas, pretty diverse ideas. Some of them were to preserve and enhance those ponds, to keep the open water as it is, to create a wetlands area or natural area. They like that side of the park being more of a nature observation zone. There was also a suggestion of maybe restoring the oak savanna that used to historically be there. Maybe creating some more open space opportunities, since the lake really takes up most of the park. Maybe there could be some more zones for play. And maybe some options as well for community gardens if people so choose. And so the next three schemes that I'm going to present really are conceptual options, going from the diversity from wet, preserving the ponds, to very dry, maybe open space suggestions. There's lots of suggestions in between, but these are really meant to kind of tease the community's brain and get them thinking about their vision. So this is the first solution. It's the watered garden. And in this solution, we suggest filling in that small pond to create a more generous buffer zone, park buffer zone between this rail corridor. Right now, that pond is right up against it. It's very tight. In this scheme, we'd also suggest dredging the bottom of the pond, making it deeper in some areas, and moving that dredge fill along the edges to create some of these wetland zones, maybe some habitat islands, maybe even this larger cool habitat island in the middle. But some of the challenges are that we have to investigate the presence of the clay liner here and make sure that there's seepage is limited. And you'd also need, the community would need to provide an additional source of water, not the source of water, but more water, more quantity. It could be on the same pump system, same piping and all of that. But obviously they need to consider the cost of that extra water. The next scheme looks at creating this wetland park, and this is something I was kind of personally interested in exploring. The main premise is that you would excavate an area in the large pond, and then take that excavation and fill it over and create an upland zone, maybe a community garden space, and perhaps there's a wet prairie swale that connects. There's actually a little bit of an existing wetland back here, so maybe there's a connection that's created. However, as interesting as this scheme might look, what we learned in our science and field investigations is that groundwater is actually below all of the lakes and ponds. It's 10 feet below existing grade. So if you're standing out here, groundwater is actually 10 feet below. So in order for this to be naturally fed, where we would need pumps, you'd have to dig down that far. And that's kind of a big hole. I think I'm a little bit over 5 foot. That's like 2 times me. That's a pretty big hole in the landscape. So that might not be the best suggestion. If the community really desired something like this feature, they could pump water into it. And so the last suggestion is looking at creating a sunken open space. And the main idea of this theme is really to not fill in the entire large pond, because that's going to require a lot of fill you have to move, it's expensive to haul, but also kind of celebrating the existence of that large pond. And so here you have a large open space. Maybe this could be the size of a soccer field, so you have the flexibility for that type of program. And on the edges, these lines represent a terracing down. So these could be generous lawn steps. You know, think about like hanging out on a lawn step. And perhaps there's even canopy trees that frame that and create more of a formal room. You think about walls on a room. And then that could kind of fade out into this natural woodland and park trails, and maybe we extend some of the existing wetland, and there's some more infiltration back there. And perhaps, you know, if there's community garden desires, they can do that. So this is just another option for the community. Actually, and they're working on a park grant right now, and so they're actually taking these schemes and moving that forward. So we're already seeing some of our planning recommendations being put into action, which is pretty exciting. Okay, so moving to the other side of the railroad, we're going to delve into the floodplain. Since the community has decided to remove the dam, there's some opportunities to restore the creek and the floodplain on the Black Earth Creek side, and so Sam's going to start off.